Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to, I don't know what episode this is. We're, I think, 4 in now. Look, there it is, week 4. So today we're talking about what's the worry, everything you need to know about events and insurance. My name is Neil Alderson. I'm a senior event advisor with Events Nova Scotia. Hello to everybody out there. Nice to see you virtually over on camera. Just some of the housekeeping items off the top. So the webinar will be recorded and it will be available to view at both the Event Atlantic and the Events Nova Scotia website later on. So if you have colleagues that weren't able to make it today, please feel free to let them know. We're going to ask everyone to stay on mute until later in the presentation if you have some questions and answers towards the end. We'd ask everyone to change your name in the window that you have to allow everybody to know who you are and what organization you're with. This is all about networking, and we want to connect with each other throughout this event, so that's important. And as I mentioned, there will be a Q&A session at the end. Because one of the goals we have is obviously to provide you with that networking opportunity and space to have some of those meaningful conversations with some of the folks that we've invited in to talk to us over the series of these webinars. So please feel free to ask questions, and maybe if you're a little shy, there's always the chat box that will be there available to post a question there as well. So the Atlantic Huddle is an educational webinar series presented by Events Nova Scotia and Events Atlantic. The series focuses on Atlantic Canada and Atlantic Canadian events, discussing some of the challenges and opportunities in the industry as a result of COVID-19. The series will continue every Wednesday for the next, I believe, 3 afternoons, starting at 2 p.m. Atlantic time. So just a little background on Event Atlantic is that they're a member-based organization, nonprofit, that provides networking and educational opportunities while serving as the leading advocate for the event industry in Atlantic Canada. The organization began as a shared initiative of communities from across the Atlantic region during the 2015 FIFA Women's World Cup that was hosted in Moncton, New Brunswick. Since then, the organization has continued to bring Atlantic Canadian cities, destinations, events, and groups together to strengthen the spirit of collaboration in event hosting and to create opportunities for developing new business through partnership and learning. So to learn more about Event Atlantic and their membership program, we encourage you to visit the website at eventatlantic.ca. A little bit on Events Nova Scotia. So we are a part of the Department of Communities, Culture and Heritage with the province of Nova Scotia. And we're here to help communities develop, adapt, and create events while facing the challenges posed by COVID-19. Our work is guided by the Nova Scotia Event Strategy, which was launched in 2018 and is the first of its kind in Nova Scotia. The Nova Scotia Event Strategy focuses on the development, attraction, and funding of events through a variety of key pillars. If you're thinking about creating, attracting, or bidding on a major event, Events Nova Scotia is here to help. So I'm pleased to welcome today our guest for our webinar, Tyler MacLaren from Marsh Canada. As a client executive, Tyler works closely with clients to define their risks, opportunities, design action items to mitigate their exposure and deliver results to effectively transfer the risk. Key segments that Tyler focuses on are agriculture, sport, event, manufacturing, construction, and transportation. Tyler actively assists in the management and formation of offshore captives in the agricultural sector, market placement oversight, and acts as a senior relationship officer to many large clients. Additionally, Tyler continues to generate new opportunities for the firm through both insurance placement and introduction of Marsh's risk consulting teams. He began working with Marsh in 2010 as a client executive sales professional, with prior experience in the global insurance company for over 5 years as a senior property casual underwriter. He worked quickly to complete his professional designation in the first 3 years of his insurance career, earning himself the FCIP, or Fellow Chartered Insurance Professional, and CRM, Canadian Risk Management designations, and continues to hold both in good standing. Good for you, Tyler. Tyler continues to educate himself in the industry via online courses that are held through the University of Toronto in the areas of many areas of insurance and risk. Tyler has been part of underwriting audit teams that traveled Canada within the insurance company to provide spot checks on underwriting practices. So today I'm pleased to have Tyler, and I'll pass it over to you. Welcome, Tyler.
Thanks, Neil. That was a good read. Thanks everybody for having me this afternoon. Being a Haligonian, involved with sport all my life, still involved with sport as a coach, my young little guy, and enjoying events, stuff like that. Event and sport has always stayed true to me, and I'm always happy to support and give back as anytime I can in this space. So really enjoy the opportunity to talk to you today, and hopefully give you some insight on what's going on in our world as it impacts yours, and what we've seen from clients going through this unfortunate pandemic that we have today. I think the best way to start is really give you a broad view of what we're seeing globally. We talk about Atlantic Canada, and we're a great group. We have our own little bubble right now. Cases are very manageable. We're doing a great job, and we always think, how are things in the world impacting us? Does a typhoon happening in the Philippines impact what happens over here in terms of our economy? Potentially, yes. Does that impact us in the world of insurance? Most likely, yes. Because what happens in our world is you have major insurance companies have their hands in all these different parts of the world, and some are doing well, some might not be doing so well, but it's all feeding back up to one balance sheet. And so those shareholders, who we actually may all be part of, are looking for good investments and stuff like that. So what happens in certain areas certainly impacts what happens to us here in Atlantic Canada. So on that, there we go. Okay, so we'll talk about how companies have responded, recovered, and are adapting during this whole pandemic. So the insurance market as it stands today. So in our world, we live in what's called a soft and a hard market. Okay, soft is typically a prolonged long cycle. Hard is usually shorter. Soft tends to be a lot of supply, a lot of demand, increased competition, a lot of capital available in the marketplace, which produces softer terms, softer rates, better pricing. As that shifts, and we were into a transitioning market in 2019, the insurance companies' balance sheets were not as favorable. And a lot of that was driven mainly from catastrophic losses over the past 3 to 4 years. Think locally, think about like Dorian, and major hurricanes and stuff like that, wildfires out west, floods, stuff like that. We're now moving into what's called a hard market, which is never a good thing to unfortunately be in. Good thing, hopefully only lasts a year or so, but the idea of being behind a hard market is simply that insurers are looking to achieve what they deem as a technical rate or underwriting profitability. So essentially what that means is for every dollar they take in premium, say for the past 3 or 4 years, they're spending $1.10, $1.15 out the door on claims, overhead expenses, and stuff like that. So that number can't last that long. So they're looking to drive that to a manageable number of typically 97 cents on the dollar going out to give them a little bit of underwriting profit, so the shareholders are happy and stuff like that. So that drives hard market. Hard market typically consists of reducing capacity on certain areas, typically on the property and liability areas. So for events, we start thinking of the liability that the event has to put up to operate. If it's 10, 15, $20 million of liability, that may be cut to half by that insurer, then requiring the event organizer to go seek alternate insurers to get to that level that you have to provide, which ultimately means at a cost. So what we're seeing for most buyers in today's market, with the reduction in the capacity, essentially the lack in supply of insurance versus the demand, we're seeing anywhere an average of 25% increases on property, 20% on liability premiums. Organizations that have directors and officers from the board level, so PSOs, NSOs, they're going to have probably see a 40% plus increase in the directors and officers. That's mainly due to COVID. That one there, which we can talk about in a bit. Like you're seeing, everything's slowing down for us. So where we were normally able to turn things around at a swift pace, a lot of working from home challenges through this period of time has impacted a lot of things. Because of what's going on with the hard market and the challenging rate, there's more influx of submissions and activity to the underwriter, so they're being bogged down, and so they're trying to find their opportunities. So it just means what it means for, as it relates to events moving forward, as you're looking to look into putting on an event and getting any form of new coverage or terms and conditions or anything like that, I would highly encourage not leave it to last minute. Really engage your service provider right away on anything new or any contract language that's going to be unique and wonky. Really give them time to assess the risks that the event's going to bring on, because you want to make sure it flows. And a lot of times, it happens a lot. Insurance is one of the last things people look at. It's more of an afterthought, saying, "Oh yeah, I've got this contract at this venue, and I need to post, so much liability insurance to this venue, and I don't have enough, and I have to go buy more for this event. Oh yeah, and it's due tomorrow." Right? Or we can't get access to the event. So, I would think like the underwriters need more time to get that across the line. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of impact right now with catastrophic losses. Hurricanes, wildfires continue to be a challenge. The insurance industry as a whole is actually monitoring climate change to really understand what does the overall climate degree look like, and how is that, if a degree changes, what does that mean? And so right now, just to, not to go on a complete tangent, but it could result in increased activity in various areas. So you can think about us on the East Coast. What do we see a lot this time of year? Hurricanes. So with the change in temperature and degree moving north, it actually perpetuates that activity. So on our side, on the other side of the country, you see a lot more drought, which leads to wildfires. So, we're really monitoring that, and the insurance companies are really monitoring that as we move forward into 2021, 2022, moving forward. And then just really looking at risk improvement. So how can companies work with engineering companies or risk consultants to really understand their true risks so that they can mitigate them more effectively, so that when you are talking to your service providers, you can demonstrate that you're doing all things capable of managing risk. It goes a long way right now in terms of finding capacity, because that's really the more challenging part right now. It's not so much price, it's actually getting capacity to put your event on. Because if you don't carry enough capacity, liability limits, regardless of what the price is, the event can't go on without the right limits. So really, we're understanding that part. So not to give you too, and then the biggest question we get since March, and using a crystal ball is, what has COVID done? How has COVID impacted the insurance world, so that I can know how COVID is going to impact me directly. So COVID is very fluid for us right now. There's a lot of analytics and research papers and surveys done, really try and identify what is the true estimate of its actual like economic impact to the insurance world right now. It's gone from originally back in March, $30 billion to $100 billion. The last thing I saw was $200 billion. Just to give you a sense of context, that's more than Hurricane Harvey, Irma, and Maria hitting at one time. And there's that, and there's a lot of court cases that are out there that can still make this number go well north. It may be overinflated, but again, we really don't know until the pandemic's over when that's over. Also, what it's doing for the insurance companies, which everyone else can relate to as well, is it's creating a lot of market volatility for their investments, a lot of economic slowdown, which ultimately for the economic slowdown for the insurer, a lot of their businesses that they're operating in have reduced capacity, reduced revenues, reduced premiums, right? Events are being canceled. So those policies are being canceled. So the premiums written by those insurers is going down as well. And then reduced investment income from the interest rates is putting a lot of pressure because, again, a lot of them are publicly traded. They need to provide shareholder value. So there's a clear split there. The outlook for the rest of 2020 is again somewhat fluid, but the losses still kind of continue. There was a part where we thought it was going to kind of plateau. Losses are still continuing, so we thought this would be the year that the insurers can kind of right side the ship. Not yet. So we're forecasting 2021 to be probably as aggressively hard in terms of market for that we had this year, which is unfortunate. We're hoping that it would plateau a bit. Catastrophic losses in Canada continue to challenge us. There's going to be a lot of pressure on rates moving forward. And policy language is changing. So what you had from an event or an organization this past year from your insurance language is likely going to be a little bit more different in 2021 as you go through your renewal cycles. There's going to be a lot more language around communicable disease, clear language specifying essentially we'll cover you for this, for all these things, but communicable disease, i.e. COVID-related type items. There is a few companies, I know Marsh is one of them, that does have, is working with insurers on sort of a pandemic insurance platform. Likely going to be geared for like the IOC and people like that, but even that's becoming challenged now. So finding pandemic insurance right now is a near impossible in the marketplace to avoid things like this. What we are seeing from that 20 billion number, just to give you a sense of like what comprises of that, a lot of it actually is coming from trip cancellation, stuff like that, insurance, event cancellation insurance, and some communicable disease coverages through various insurance companies. Obviously, you think of the Olympic Games being postponed to 2021, what kind of impact that may have had into the numbers, and if that does not go off in 2021, how that could definitely impact it even further. So going through this pandemic, we really focus on three different viewpoints of the crisis, right? And through our engineering or our consulting stages, we're looking at, okay, how are clients first responding to what's being put in front of them, i.e. the pandemic. And then as we move that, so it's a very short-term focus, okay, what do I got to do today to manage things? Then through the recovery, going, okay, things are starting to open up a little bit. What are we doing as we recover? Like what are our challenges? Where are we moving to? And then what's our long-term strategy? So moving forward, if this is going to be the new norm, what do we need to do to implement things today so that we can adapt moving forward and be successful? Because the one thing we are seeing is the clients, unfortunately, that are not using a sort of methodology like this and having that recovery extending into an adaptation phase are being challenged in financially, and probably realistically won't be around to move forward, which is unfortunately the sad thing about it. But so initially, when we look at sport and event, cancellations, like everything was pretty much shut down. So immediate cancellation of events. I'm trying to figure out, okay, if we're canceling or we're deferring. If we're canceling, how are we refunding tickets and loss of revenue from this event? Facilities are being shut down on us, so we can't host our events at various facilities that we wanted to, or maybe we could have converted it to an outdoor one, but the timing of the year is off, so it has to be postponed. Working from home strategies. We're all virtually right now working. A lot of us are working from home. So how are we going to do that? Are we set up with the right IT infrastructure to accommodate that? If not, how do we do it? Who do I need to call? Who needs to get first priority for certain things? What other services do we need? Do we need to expand and buy equipment like laptops and monitors and stuff like that? And then the reduced supply chain. So, obviously the board's shut down except for essential workers. Maybe there's some certain supplies that need to come up that can't come up. Maybe there's a slowdown on what's being transported. We saw a lot of slowdowns with even with food or anything else. So there was a hard push there. And then from our side, we saw a lot of submission activity for event cancellation coverage, which goes back to that $20 billion number I was talking about earlier. So that was the immediate stages. As things started to change a bit, we started going through this recovery stage, and then clients are really focusing on, okay, what's the health and safety aspect of what we're going to be working with for the next 60, 90, 120 days. What venues are going to be available for us to work with? Are we going to be capped with how many people can be in a venue? What's our limitations? Obviously here in Canada, in the summertime, how many people could be in an outdoor event? 50. How do we manage that with spectators, participants, coaches, like that? How do we manage the medical symptoms? What sort of training practice facilities can we use? And can they be do they have to be the same, or can they be different from where the games are being held? What sort of technologies do we need to implement now going forward to manage tracking of athletes and participants and spectators and stuff like this, and technologies of educating and teaching people modules of training for coaches and stuff like this, or get spectators into an event via technology. Is that an option? Where are our supply chains? Who was my supplier before? Can I still use that supplier? Do I need to start augmenting and looking at different suppliers and broadening out my supply chain network on what I need for my event to run because of the pandemic? Maybe I can't get to where I get from who I need, so now I got to expand. Or conversely, maybe I need to contract and focus on one or two suppliers who are domestic and local. Geography obviously has a big play. We're looking from Atlantic here. Marsh, we look at it from a global level. So obviously, the US is completely different than where we are in Canada. Atlantic Canada is very different than where we are with Quebec and Ontario and the other provinces. So what challenges are we going to have from people coming from those various geographies, maybe to participate in an event or come visit, see an event, or have the sponsor or the presenter from those various geographies coming in for maybe a music concert or something like that? How do we do that? And what kind of participation levels are we going to see? Like, are we going to have a basic uptick? Are we going to have people kind of stepping back saying, as much as you want to put on your event or your sport organization wants to get things going again, are we going to have not enough participation to make it worthwhile? So moving through that recovery phase and going through many of these conversations in various, each one has subsectors of a certain magnitude. Move into the adaptation phase, and organizations looking at going, okay, new norm as it stands today in Atlantic Canada, what are we doing? We have to socially distance to a certain amount. So how do we do that? We know we're gonna have to do it. Let's implement it, and let's identify how many people can have at a certain event within a certain confined space. Wearing mask requirements. Okay, what does that look like? If I think of my daughter's ringette, when can she take off her mask to play ringette? At what stage does that happen? At what stage do I have to keep mine on? How long and where? Screening procedures, various types there. Questions of, do you go with a thermometer? Do you go with the check sheet? How are you tracking that? What does that look like moving forward? And how do we tie that back into technology to make it more seamless for people? So if I think of my son's basketball, am I going online and filling out that form, or do I have to write it every time? For me, going in and filling out the form, a lot easier to do after and before the fact. Identifying my venues. Which ones can I work with? Which ones do I need to change from? I've always hosted an event at this venue, but that venue is now permanently shut down until pandemic's over, so I now need to switch over here. Or no, I can still work with this venue, but I need to start working with them on their COVID guidelines. Maybe their COVID guidelines don't match what ours are from a sport or event or organization level. So we need to start intertwining those. The bubble concepts, obviously, is bubble concept of, do you bubble just the teams together, or do you bubble just the event organizers together, stuff like that. And then COVID treatments and developments, as hopefully as fast as this COVID a vaccine could be readily available. How do you manage that with your events and your participants? So those last two are really probably more long term, as we're still waiting for obviously a vaccine. But it's things that you need to keep in mind as you're moving through these phases of, okay, if we're getting a vaccine in 2021, last quarter, what does that look like for my event that's taking place in the summertime? Maybe I'm hosting a big festival or something like that. So it's just little things like that you just want to keep in mind. And how are we doing for time there, Neil? You're on mute. Sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to say about 5 minutes. If
Okay.
You can wrap that. Good.
Yeah. So I'll leave it with, just want to give you a sense of who we are. We're a global company. There's probably about 200 of us in the sport practice. The head person, there's two, one in New York and one in Atlanta, that oversee all the global activity. In the U.S., there's about 150 U.S. sport and event clients. There's many more in across the world. Do a lot of work in Europe, Asia, Canada. Do a lot of work. A lot of our work is done from the risk engineering, risk consulting side. So one of the things right now is pandemic risk and athlete safety. So it's working with our specialists, the consultants, on building models to track outbreaks in various regions as organizations look to create new events or revisit their events, to understand, okay, how do we manage outbreaks? If we're doing a bubble, if the NHL is doing a bubble in Edmonton, how are we managing the athlete safety in that bubble? So stuff like that. And then obviously we're doing a lot of transactional stuff, placing insurance. That's the easy part, but really working with our clients from a consulting side to understand what their true risks are and how best to manage them. And with that, I will turn this back over to you guys.
Perfect. Thanks, Tyler. I mean, certainly lots to think about there from your side of things. And I will certainly open it up if you have questions. Maybe you can raise your hand or enter the question into the chat bar. But I'll start things off with something I've been thinking about from an event and an insurance perspective is the whole area of liability. I don't know if you could speak to, I know certainly a lot of people that I talk to on the event side are worried about liability. What's your thoughts around, what's sort of in that space given where we are with COVID and trying to host events in our region and other things? Do you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah, so first thing, when it comes to liability, the first thing you should always consider is your contractual liability, right? So what contracts am I signing? Who am I signing them with? What does that spell out? What am I taking responsibility for? Stuff like that. But yeah, when you're hosting an event, the onus is on the organizer to have a duty of diligence or fiduciary duty, a duty of care to any participant, spectator, coach, referee, coming in, whether it's a musical event or anything like that. That duty of care for them has gone up that much more exponentially, probably, with COVID, and really tracking of who's been in touch with who, to make sure that you do not want to have an outbreak at your event, obviously. Mm-hmm. But really managing that, I think the duty of care has definitely gone up a lot more than it has in the past.
Yeah.
We used to talk about hockey, duty of care, head injury, stuff like that, which, don't get me wrong, concussion, all that is still prevalent. But now throw COVID in there but you got to manage people who have been exposed in an arena. How do I do that? Right? Because I'm ultimately responsible. The buck stops with me.
Yeah. Which the other area that I think and certainly I'll welcome your thoughts on this, but is how important is that proactive risk assessment now? With COVID, I think for a lot of people, COVID was a bit of an eye opener to go wow, I didn't know I could be completely shut out of business, right? Or at least, for a lot of people, it was an eye opener to know that, all of a sudden a pandemic would be shutting everything event related down that we can ever imagine. Again, do you see that idea of events or groups that are putting those events on to really take that risk assessment piece up front more seriously now?
I do. I really do. And it's almost being dictated by the insurance world. So any renewal we're going through right now, event organized, or just any other industry, one of the key questions underwriters are asking us are, what's their COVID protocol? What are they doing? How are they managing it? From an employee safety side of things, but also trying to understand how are you managing it so they can stay operational? And then also on that, with events, so an organization that's putting on events, each event has its own individuality, but the organization as a whole has a duty. And from there, when I mentioned earlier, the directors and officers world of insurance gone up 40% or more. We've seen well north of 40%. A lot of it's driving back from COVID claims. So organizers who have directors and officers insurance, or like sport organizations or stuff like this, the D&O of that world, they're being, again, insurers are asking them, I want to see your COVID protocol before I even consider renewing you or underwriting you. Because I need to know that, the marketplace right now is being heavily injected with class action lawsuits right now. And we want to know that, you've got your proper controls in place so that, you're not creating an outbreak or causing anything else, or going to be financially liable for wrongfully doing something. So I would say it's actually probably to the extreme. Like, companies should really be looking at what I mentioned earlier, like risk recommendations, like speaking with people to understand, like, what's my true exposure? How do I build that so that I can go to the insurance market and be prepared proactively, and then be in a reactive position with them.
So again, any questions from anyone else out there? I've lots, so I'm happy to keep asking, but certainly want to provide an opportunity for anybody to ask a question who's online with us here. Hearing none, I'll continue. What sort of advice do you have, Tyler, for maybe, the event organizer or even communities maybe that are putting events on? Do you have some advice on, what types of conversations should they be having with their provider? Whether it's the available products that are possibly there for them, or the services, be it like the risk assessment or other things. Do you have some thoughts around, what are the types of things they should be talking to their insurance provider about, or those that they deal with insurance?
Yeah, no, great. It first starts with be early, don't be late. So if you're putting on an event and you want to start talking to your suppliers, be early. A lot of it comes down to here's what we're doing for COVID practices, right? And really being transparent with them. Because they are as much as, yes, they're event, like they're your supplier for insurance, and you're paying them an insurance bill. And I get nobody likes to pay insurance, and I don't like paying my own insurance, but it's something we all have to have. But truly, they are a partner with you to help your event go without having any issues, and they do have some thoughts towards how best to handle certain things. So I think it's if you haven't gone through a risk engineering, like a risk study kind of thing, assessment, and you don't want to do that, and that's fine. But if you have some idea, like, here's what we're going to do from a COVID practices and procedures manual, hand it over to them. Let them review it. Let them critique it. It's okay to be wrong in certain areas, right? They might come back and say, nah, I think this makes more sense. We're seeing this, we're seeing that. So I think be proactive, be transparent, work with them. The better you work with them, the more likely are you to get long short of it.
Absolutely. So we do have a question or a comment, I guess, but from Elizabeth Clark. Provincial guidelines being followed and COVID plan in place, including waivers. What more could be expected for due diligence shown should not be scared? Sorry. Provincial guidelines being followed and COVID plan in place, including waivers. What more could be expected? Due diligence shown, not be scared of a lawsuit. So I guess they're pointed it around, that idea of the waiver area and the due diligence piece.
Yeah, no, like so obviously meeting your provincial guidelines is critical. That's first and foremost. So you're doing that. You got your procedures in place. I would question whether or not the procedures are only meeting provincial guidelines, or like have they been sort of tested or audited. So there might be an opportunity there to create maybe something a little bit better, maybe not. But I would just challenge that part a little bit. But and then when signing waivers, yeah, waivers are important. I'm not saying they're not. They give you a chance to identify to the person who signed the waiver that, hey, you know, we have things in place. You need to take some accountability for certain things too, right? The waiver, if in a gross negligence position, the waiver would probably be thrown out because of maybe it was a gross negligent error on the organizer. But the waiver does help set a precedent and some understanding to the person who's signing it. So I definitely think they need to be there. So I think back to that question, I think just making sure that the procedures are, you know, obviously meeting provincial guidelines, but if there's anything else that could be recommended based off what that event is looking like, you may want to add them in, that's all.
Another question here it says, with a policy in place for a venue and a policy in place for a presenter renting a venue, where does responsibility lie for insurance? Public Health in Nova Scotia says the host is responsible. What's your thought around that, around the venue, the presenter, both?
So I'm going to assume under this question that the venue is the organizer.
This sounds like it sounds like there's an organizer who has rented a venue,
yeah,
and there's you know, a policy in place with the venue, and then there's a policy in place with the organizer.
Okay, so how I would view that is if something was to happen, the venue has a duty of care under the venue for its premises. Make sure that they're safe and free of any form of obstruction or something that could cause an injury or damage or something like that. They're also responsible for people that are coming in and out of their venue to make sure, if we're talking COVID, that they've been probably screened and stuff like that. I would say the organizer, the last person on the list is probably the participant or the person playing. The organizer also has a duty of care in collaboration with the venue to make sure that their policies and everything's set up properly for anyone participating in the event in question. I would say the last person would be the participant or the person, the presenter, something like that. You know, there's an onus on, there would be an onus, again, I would probably bring it back to the organizer saying, if I'm presenting to you publicly, physically, you know, it's probably on you as the organizer to make sure that I'm healthy, right? There's an onus on me to tell you if I'm not feeling well, kind of thing too. But I say it goes right back up to the owner, the organizer, and the venue, myself.
Yeah, and I think your message would be very much what I would give somebody who is coming to us for advice too, which is the importance of communication. And you know, the idea of, you know, asking the venue, if you're an organizer, so asking the venue what their, you know, policy is or guidelines that they have around COVID, and vice versa. If you're a facility, you need to be talking to your organizer about what, you know, they're putting in place from a COVID perspective, or communicating what your plan is or your expectations are for someone who's renting your facility, and making that clear and making it up front so there's no surprises, you know, the day before the event kicks off, or if there's things that are a policy from a venue or an event organizer's perspective, they have lots of time to get that out to attendees, to communicate that, and other pieces, because you know, every event, every venue is different, and you know, I think the clearer you can be with having those communications and conversations up front, the better y'all are going to be off on that.
Yeah, I would agree. Proactivity, communication, transparency.
Yeah. The line I keep using with people, and I think probably people will relate to this, is, unfortunately, there's no cookbook to how this operates. And, every event that's looking to operate is different. And it requires sometimes a different set of protocols that need to be in place, or how they're going to operate. And, to your point, proactivity is hugely important.
Yeah, and I be honest with you, I can speak from Marsh. The reality is, like, we have 44,000 people globally hit with a pandemic at once. We had to be nimble. We had to shut things down very quickly. Had to, reorganize things. In Canada, we're still all working from home. We're limited with where we can go. Right? There's no travel.
Yeah.
We're shut down. But it's also on how do you manage it, right? And being somewhat fluid and flexible and adaptable to those changes, I think, are going to be critical for events moving forward.
Yeah. And I know you and I had some time to connect earlier, and I always think it's good because, to get rid of the notion that there's coverage out there to cover COVID related things. But I think you touched on that in your remarks a little earlier. But there is no policy that an event or a group can buy to protect them from anything sort of COVID or communicable disease related.
Not going forward.
Yeah.
A lot of it, like, there's some event insurance. So event insurance, you could have, there's basic, and then you can bolt on, and you can buy more. And like full-blown coverages some of them had a pandemic as an insured peril, essentially, to pay. That's going to be gone.
Yeah.
Moving forward.
Yeah.
So you're likely going to see a communicable disease type of exclusion language in all policies.
Yeah. So any other questions from anybody out there, feel free to post it, or if you wanted to ask it, I'll give you a chance to do that. Quiet bunch today. I'll wrap up with one last question, Tyler, that I think might be timely as well. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on, whether it's an event or a facility or anything along those lines. Where have you seen those types of organizations go wrong with their event insurance or insurance in general? Like, are there things that are, I don't want to say best practices, but I guess where some of those mistakes have been?
So we've seen mistakes. Thinking that the insurance is like just like a formality, right? It's I need to get it so I can have this thing, and that's it. And really not putting more light into the language, that the contracts that you're buying, contracts that you're entering into, contracts that you're buying from insurance. They're not always the same. I think there's some areas there, right? Contracts that you enter into can have direct impact on your insurance programs through contractual liability, and really not taking time to dive deep into that, because I get it. Like, there's a lot, like, putting on the event, like, there's a lot of things going on, and a lot of different silos and buckets and people doing certain activities, and sometimes they intertwine, sometimes they don't. But like, looking at, like, if you got someone who's in charge of sponsorship, and then you got someone in charge of, like, let's just say putting on an athletic event, and they're in charge of transportation of athletes, but the transportation is company that's doing all the athletic stuff is ABC company, but your main title sponsor is XYZ company, who's a transport company, and they're not talking, and then becomes an issue sometimes. We've seen that happen. And it gets into, like, okay, well, you're being breached. It's just from an insurance level. you know, we try to get engaged with clients well in advance, right? Like people are engaged in legal teams and stuff, like organizers and like accountants and stuff like that. You know, engage us early so we can share some thoughts in terms of what we see as risk. You know, that example I just talked about, it may not be an insurable risk, but it's a risk. So we're not like, it's not just transactional items, I guess is where I'm going with it. It's not just buy and sell insurance and it's easy to go. It's understanding risk assessment and then going, okay, yep, you got a risk here where your title sponsor is not doing your transport, but they should be.
Right.
Right. So you need to manage that risk. Stuff like that.
Yeah. So often, you know, they might be being in a position to help you identify issues ahead of time, or in some cases, maybe even save you money if you deal it a different way, put a different lens on it.
Yeah, look at things a little bit differently, construct it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yep.
Okay, well, thanks, Tyler. With that, I'd like to thank you for agreeing to come in and share your insights around what's happening in the insurance world with events and the pandemic and all the other pieces. So a part of a small way to help support our partners in the hospitality industry that may be struggling due to COVID-19, we are drawing a name from a list of participants each week to win a gift card to a local restaurant or cafe in your area. The winner will be notified via email. As a part of that, we encourage you to support local wherever you can. And perhaps venture out to try some of our presenters' favorites when you're in the area. Tyler, I understand yours being Morris East and Ronaldo's Pizza here in Halifax, and Harvest here in Bedford and Halifax. And I'm a big fan of here in Bedford, but also in Dartmouth, the Millstone restaurant pub, if you're looking for a great spot in either of those two locations. And finally, I'm going to wrap up just to let you know, we've got a great webinar lined up again next week around communications and how you stay connected when you can't connect. As we all know now more than ever, it's important to communicate around our events with our audiences to keep them connected. Whether it's communicating the change in the events, new policies, procedures, or how do we deal with an event that's maybe canceled or postponed. So we'll be joined by Don Beaton of Celtic Colors. If you were paying attention to that event earlier in the fall, they went totally virtual and had a great successful event online, but I'll be interested to hear how they communicated that with their audience, as well as Brendan Smithson, who is with the North American Indigenous Games, another event that unfortunately has been hit by the pandemic and had to be canceled, and you know, how they deal with athletes and the cancellation of all their folks from across North America and how they are moving forward. So we'll look forward to some of their insights into to that next week. So it's next Wednesday, November 4th at 2 p.m. So thanks very much, and we appreciate you coming out to participate in these webinars as well. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.